Hi everyone. The subject of today's talking pictures, which I've called Bowsprits and Barnacles, is the Port Chalmers dry docks. Our story starts in 1868. On the 4th of August, Floating Dock Alpha was launched. It was the first floating dock in New Zealand, and the first vessel to use it was the bark Eleanor on August the 28th. But this photo shows the brig Emma, which arrived here from Chile with a cargo of flour in December 1868. It went into the dry dock before heading off to Macau with Chinese passengers and gold in January 1869. In May 1870, the SS Taranaki became the longest vessel to enter the floating dock. In fact, it was too long for the dock by 25 feet. Extra side gates lined with oakum and canvas had to be added to the dock to keep the vessel dry. When the floating dock was launched in 1868, work was also just beginning on the construction of a permanent stone dock. You may have heard me talk in a previous episode of Talking Pictures about how this was an impressive feat of engineering and how it required 90,000 cubic feet of dressed stone, 1,400 tons of Portland cement, and a large workforce to build it. In May 1871, the SS Phoebe became the first vessel to use the new stone dock. Later the same month, the Taranaki needed to go into the dock to have a broken rudder fixed. While the Taranaki was in there, a terrible accident occurred. Late on a Saturday night, John Stark, who was a fireman in the graving dock's engine room, was heading home after his shift when he lost his footing, fell into the dock, and was knocked senseless. He clung to life for more than 24 hours before he was finally pronounced dead. Although it was already being used, the new dock wasn't officially opened until March 1872. And a few months later, in May, this photo was taken showing the Omeo in the dock for repairs to its rudder, which was damaged when it struck some rocks while leaving Port Chalmers. By the 1890s, with the size of ships getting even larger, the dock was proving too small. A bigger one was needed. And here we see members of the Dock Trust taking a look at the proposed site for a new one to be built. Before work could start on this third dock, the ground strata needed to be tested, so 34 bore samples were taken in 1904. The site was confirmed, and on the 4th of December 1905, Premier Richard Seddon performed the turning of the first sod. The site was dredged, and work began on the construction of a timber cofferdam. Electric lighting was installed, which would enable 3 shifts of men to work round the clock. Once the timber work on the cofferdam was complete, the Bluff Harbour Board's dredge was employed to dig up clay, which was then pumped into the gap between the inner and outer walls of the dam. While the dam was being built, stonemasons had begun preparing blocks of stone for lining the dock. You can see that happening in the foreground of this photo. And here we have a closer view. Once the dam was completed, the water could then be pumped out. That, of course, resulted in a reduction in the amount of pressure on the inside of the wall of the dam and an increase in the pressure on the outside of the wall. Some began to question whether the dam would stand the strain, but with the help of extra silt and some angle piles to prop up the inner wall of the dam, it survived. After most of the water had been pumped out, the bones of a boat known as the Tarbert Castle were found mired in the silt. The Tarbert Castle had been brought from Melbourne in the early 1860s and had been used as a lighter and then a coal hulk on the harbour before being stripped and abandoned. As the water level came down, the newly exposed mud and silt could then be excavated to make way for the foundations of the dock to be built. As well as men and drays, 2 cranes were used to help with the excavation. Trucks on rails were also later used to help carry away the spoil. But even so, work progressed slowly and construction fell behind schedule. By February 1907, only about 2/3 of the site had been excavated down to bedrock, so that the laying of concrete could finally begin. On Saturday the 6th of July 1907, 3 weeks into the job, William Haberfield arrived home from work at 9 o'clock and went to bed. In the small hours of Sunday morning, he awoke to loud crackling sounds. Suffocating clouds of smoke began to pour into his room. He jumped out a window, calling for his family to follow his escape route. When they didn't appear, William went back into the burning building to look for them. While he managed to find his wife's 11-year-old sister and got her out, he was unable to save his wife and their 4-year-old son. The badly burned 11-year-old sister-in-law also soon passed away, leaving William as the sole survivor of this terrible tragedy. By the end of August 1907, it was reported that the dock was slowly but surely assuming a more definite shape. But it wasn't until May the following year that newspapers could report that the concrete work was finally finished, and that it was now truly beginning to look like a dock should. The 72 feet long steel caisson, or gate, with its watertight chambers and regulating valves that enabled it to be raised and lowered over the entrance to the dock, was soon ready to be fitted. But the dock was still months away from opening. The ground around the dock had to be filled in, the cofferdam had to be removed, the entrance had to be dredged, the pumping plant had to be tested, and so on. The dock's estimated to have contained over 23 million litres of water at high tide. The plant supplied by A&T Burt took a little over 5 hours to pump that amount of water from the dock. The dock was originally supposed to take less than a year and a half to complete. In reality, it was 3.5 years in the making and was finally declared open on the 30th of June 1909. Thanks for watching.